My name is Iris Tremaine, and I just turned 18. At my birthday party last night, my dad pulled me aside and whispered, "When this is over, you're going to sign some papers for Uncle Wade. Just a formality." I smiled. I nodded. Then I walked into the kitchen, opened my laptop, and quietly transferred my entire multi-million-dollar inheritance from my grandparents into an irrevocable trust just as a precaution. The next morning, my parents and my younger sister found out that the cabin, the savings, the investments, everything, was locked behind a legal wall they couldn't touch. My dad turned white. My uncle, who had already signed a deal to sell property he never owned, called a lawyer. Now let me take you back 6 years to a summer at Cedar Lake when my grandfather said something I didn't understand until last night. The summer I turned 12, my grandfather, Harold Tremaine, picked me up in his truck and drove me 40 minutes to Cedar Lake. The cabin sat back from the water, surrounded by white pines so tall they blocked the afternoon sun. The porch sagged on one side. The screen door didn't latch right. It smelled like wood smoke and old books, and something sweet I could never quite name. "Grab the other end, Grandpa," I said, lifting a fence rail. I did. We spent the morning replacing 3 rotted posts along the south side. He didn't rush me. He showed me how to check for soft spots by pressing my thumb into the grain. If it gave, it was done. Inside, Grandma Vivian had iced tea and 2 sandwiches waiting on the kitchen table, the one Grandpa built himself the year they got married. She was reading on the porch when I came out, and she patted the chair beside her. We sat and watched the lake until the light turned gold. "This cabin stays in the family," Grandpa told me that evening, wiping sawdust off his hands. "But family isn't always blood, Iris. Family is whoever shows up." I didn't fully understand what he meant. I was 12. I thought he was being poetic. He wasn't. That whole summer, I came back to Cedar Lake every weekend. I learned where the water heater leaked, which windows stuck, how to bleed the radiator. In October, Grandma taught me to organize the bookshelves by color because it makes the room feel warmer. Grandpa showed me the property line markers, old iron stakes he hammered in himself. I didn't know then that my grandfather was already talking to a lawyer about exactly this place, about exactly me. Back home, the air was different. Our house in Ridgemont was fine. 3 bedrooms, a yard that needs mowing, a garage my dad used as an office for his building supply store. Fine. Not warm, just fine. My sister Kelsey was 10, and she had the bigger bedroom, redecorated last spring with lavender walls and a desk lamp that cost more than my entire bookshelf. My room still had the stained carpet from the previous owners. At dinner, my dad brought up the cabin. "Dad's place is just sitting there losing value," Greg said, cutting his steak. "Property taxes alone are killing us. We should sell it, reinvest." My mom nodded, saying it made sense. "Grandpa said the cabin stays in the family," I said. Greg laughed, not a mean laugh, but worse, a dismissive one. "You were 12, Iris. He was being nice." Nobody asked me anything else. The conversation moved to Kelsey's debate trophy. Regional finalist, very impressive, and Denise had already framed the certificate. I won the district science fair 2 weeks ago, but the ribbon was still crumpled in the bottom of my backpack. After dinner, I cleared the plates. On the counter, half hidden under a grocery list, lay a glossy flyer, Ridgeline Development, lakefront lots, premium prices now acquiring. There was a handwritten phone number in the margin. I didn't know whose handwriting it was, but it wasn't my dad's. I put the flyer back exactly where I found it. I sat on my bed upstairs and thought about Grandpa's kitchen table, the one he built with his hands, the one where Grandma set my sandwich without asking what I wanted because she already knew. I thought about the flyer downstairs. Someone was already measuring my grandparents' home in dollar signs. Grandpa Harold died 2 years later. I was 14. The funeral was on a Tuesday under a gray sky and damp grass, with folding chairs that sank into the lawn. I sat in the second row holding his handkerchief, blue plaid, frayed at the edges, smelling faintly of pine. At the reception, I noticed Greg and his brother Wade standing by the dessert table, not eating, talking low. Wade had a folder tucked under his arm. Greg kept nodding. I caught one sentence from Wade. "We should move on this before probate gets complicated." They were talking about the cabin at the funeral. I said nothing. I was 14. I had no power, no voice, and no idea that my grandfather already accounted for this exact moment. 2 years passed. I was 16. Grandma Vivian got sick in March and was gone by June. She held my hand the last time I visited, her grip surprisingly firm. "The cabin is yours, Iris," she whispered. "Don't let them take it, promise me." I promised her. She squeezed my hand once and closed her eyes. After the funeral, another gray day with the same sinking folding chairs, Greg sat at our kitchen table and said to Denise, "Now we can finally sort out the property." He said it with relief, like something heavy had lifted. That same evening, Wade called. I heard Greg on the phone in the garage, packing. "Yeah, no, I agree, let's get it moving." His voice was lighter than it had been in weeks. I was standing in the hallway holding a glass of water, and I realized something that sat in my chest like a stone. My grandmother's death wasn't a loss to them. It's a clearance. I don't cry that night. I make a different kind of decision. I just don't know how to act on it yet. Between 16 and almost 18, the cabin became my quiet rebellion. Every Saturday morning, I drove out to Cedar Lake in the used Honda I bought with babysitting money. I patched the porch screen. I replaced the weather stripping on the back door. I swept pine needles off the roof because Grandpa taught me that's how leaks start. At home, the conversations shifted. The cabin stopped being Grandpa's place and started being the family property. Greg said this at dinner like it's always been true. Wade showed up more often now, every other Sunday, sometimes with manila folders, sometimes with a laptop open to real estate listings. I tried once to intervene, asking, "What about Grandma's wish? She wanted me to keep it." Denise put down her fork gently, the way she does before correcting Kelsey's homework. "Your grandma was emotional at the end, sweetie. This is business." Business. That's the word they use for everything that used to be love. By 17, Greg started being more direct. "When you turn 18, we'll figure this out as a family." The way he says family, I know it means his way or no way at all. One November afternoon, alone at the cabin, I was clearing out the hall closet. Behind a stack of old quilts, I found a sealed envelope in Grandma Vivian's handwriting with my name on the front. Inside lay a single business card, Margaret Caldwell, attorney at law. Below her name, printed in small type, Tremming Family Trust. My hands shook, not from fear, but from recognition. Grandma left this here for me to find. She knew I'd be the one cleaning out closets. Not Greg, not Wade, me. I slipped the card into my wallet. I don't call, not yet. 3 months before my 18th birthday, Margaret Caldwell called me first. The call came on a Thursday evening in February while I was in my room doing calculus homework. My phone showed an unknown number with a local area code. "Iris, this is Margaret Caldwell. I was your grandparents' attorney." Her voice was steady, professional, and careful, like someone who'd rehearsed this opening. "I need to speak with you before your birthday. There are things you need to know, and there isn't much time." She told me to meet her the following Saturday at her office downtown. Alone. I went. Margaret Caldwell was in her late 50s, silver-haired with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her office was small, organized, and smelled like old paper and coffee. She sat across from me and opened a thick folder. "Your grandparents hired me 6 years ago," she said. "They established an irrevocable trust. The cabin, a savings account, and an investment portfolio. Total value approximately $2.1 million. All of it is held in the trust. You are the sole beneficiary." I felt the room tilt slightly. My grandparents left me everything. They transferred it into the trust while they were alive. Legally, it never entered their estate. It can't go through probate. Your father and uncle have no claim. She slid a document across the desk, a summary of the trust with my name on the second line. The title to the cabin was recorded under the trust at the county recorder's office 6 years ago. "Your father doesn't know that. Why didn't they tell him?" Margaret paused. "Your grandfather said, and these are his words, 'My sons will sell that cabin before the funeral flowers wilt.'" The room was quiet. I stared at the paper with my name on it. There's something else. Margaret said someone had been making inquiries at the county recorder's office about the cabin's title within the last month. I started paying close attention after that meeting, not suspiciously, just quietly. The next Sunday, Wade came over for dinner. Afterward, he and Greg disappeared into the garage. The door was open a crack, not enough to see, but enough to hear Wade's voice. "I already signed the purchase agreement with Ridgeline for $450, but we need the title clean before closing." Greg asked, "How do we get it clean?" "Quitclaim deed," Wade responded instantly. "Dad's gone. Mom's gone. We're the legal heirs. We quitclaim the property to ourselves, record it, and sell." "Is that legal?" Greg hesitated. It's a standard real estate transfer between heirs. Nobody's going to question it. A pause, then Greg spoke quieter. What about Iris? My chest tightened. Wade's answer came fast, like he'd already thought about it. She's 17, Greg. She can't do anything. And by the time she's 18, the sale goes through. Done deal. She'll be upset, but she'll get over it. We'll give her a cut. 50 grand for college. She should be grateful. I stepped back from the garage door, my hands freezing cold. Wade had already signed a purchase agreement for $450,000 with a development company for a cabin he didn't own, on land held in a trust he didn't know existed. That night, I sat on my bed and texted Margaret 2 words. They're accelerating. Her reply came in 3 minutes. I expected that. Come see me Saturday. We'll prepare everything you need. I closed my phone and stared at the ceiling. In the next room, Kelsey was watching a show, laughing at something. Downstairs, my parents were loading the dishwasher, talking about weekend plans like nothing was happening. And in the garage, somewhere in Wade's folder, lay a contract that was already worthless. He just didn't know it yet. Saturday at Margaret's office, she laid out the timeline on a legal pad, drawing sharp lines between dates like a battle plan. The cabin title is already under the trust. If Wade files a quitclaim deed, the county recorder should reject it because the chain of title won't match. The property hasn't been in your grandparents' personal name for 6 years. But if he submits additional documentation, an affidavit of heirship, maybe a falsified death certificate, he could create what's called a cloud on title. That won't give him ownership, but it could tie the property up in litigation for a year or more. So you have to act first. How? I asked. You have to act on time. She tapped the calendar. The moment you turn 18, you're a legal adult. You can formally accept the role of successor beneficiary. Once you sign, I file a lease pendens, a public notice of legal interest at the county recorder's office first thing the next morning. That freezes the title. Nobody can record anything against it. I nod. What do I need to do? Show up, sign one document, I'll handle the rest. I sat with that for a moment. Should I tell my parents? Margaret took off her glasses. Your grandfather specifically asked me to protect you, Iris, not to negotiate with them. I drove home. Greg was in the kitchen, uncharacteristically cheerful. Good news, kiddo, I'm throwing you a birthday party. Whole family Saturday night. It's a big one. 18. He smiled. Denise smiled. Even Kelsey clapped. I smiled too. My dad was planning my birthday party. My uncle was planning to sell my grandmother's cabin. And I was sitting at the kitchen table smiling because in 9 days I was going to let them think everything was going exactly according to their schedule. Sitting in my room that night knowing what was coming was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Part of me wanted to walk downstairs and just say it. Dad, I know. But Margaret was right. If I tipped them off, they'd find another way around it. So I stayed quiet and I waited. 5 days before my birthday, my mom sat down next to me on the couch. She was using her let's talk like adults voice, soft, practiced, and slightly rehearsed. Now that you're almost 18, Iris, there are some family decisions we should make together. Together. The word landed on me like a hollow costume. The cabin costs money to maintain, Denise continued. Taxes, insurance, repairs. Your dad's business has been struggling. And if we sell, we could pay off the debt and set up a college fund for you and Kelsey. Both of you. Grandma wanted me to keep it, I repeated quietly. Denise's expression shifted. A sudden flash of impatience quickly smoothed over. Your grandma was very sentimental at the end, Iris, but sentiment doesn't pay property taxes. Greg walked in right on cue, making me wonder if they had completely choreographed this performance. I've already talked to a buyer, he said. Good price, fair deal. Who's the buyer? I asked. He blinked. A development company. Wade knows them. What company? A longer pause stretched out. Ridgeline something, they're reputable. I didn't push further. I'll think about it, I said. Greg patted my shoulder proudly. That's my girl. He walked away satisfied, like he'd just closed a clean negotiation. Later that night, Kelsey knocked on my door. She was in her pajamas, her hair still damp from the shower. Iris? Yeah. She sat on the edge of my bed, nervously picking at a thread on the comforter. Mom and Dad keep talking about the cabin at night after I'm supposed to be asleep. She looked at me sideways. They sound different, like they're planning something. Different how? I asked. Like they're excited but also really nervous. She paused, her voice getting smaller. Is something going on? I pulled the blanket over her feet. Don't worry about it, Kels. She nodded but didn't look entirely convinced. I said I'd think about it, but that wasn't a yes. And they knew it, which is why they were going to keep pushing. 3 days before my birthday, Uncle Wade showed up completely unannounced. He caught me in the driveway just as I was coming back from the grocery store. He was wearing casual clothes, sporting a big smile, and leaning against his car like he just happened to be in the neighborhood. Wade was a real estate agent. Absolutely nothing he did was accidental. "Hey kiddo, got a minute? Just want to talk." We sat on the cold front steps. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Here's the thing, Iris. That lake lot, just the land alone, is worth $450. I can get us a deal with a buyer I trust. Fast, close, clean paperwork." "And what do I get?" I asked. $50,000 cash for college." I let the number hang heavily in the air. 50 out of 450. Wade smiled like I've said something cute. "You're 18, Iris. 50 grand is a lot of money for someone your age. Most kids would jump at that." "Whose name is on the deed, Uncle Wade?" The smile froze on his face just for a single second. A dangerous flicker behind the eyes, a tiny micro-adjustment, and then the mask slipped back on. "Your grandparents, but they're gone now. Passes to your dad and me as next of kin." "That's not how it works. I know it, and he should know it because he sells houses for a living. But he was counting entirely on me being ignorant." "I'll think about it," I said again. Wade stood up, brushing off his jeans. "Don't overthink this one, Iris. Opportunities like this don't wait around." He drove away, and before he was even at the end of the street, I could see his mouth moving through the driver's window as he talked on the phone. That night I texted Margaret again. "They're accelerating." She replied immediately, "Stay the course. 3 more days." 3 more days. I can do 3 more days. The night before my birthday, I drove to the cabin completely alone. The road was pitch black and silent. Cedar Lake sat flat and dark under a half moon, and the pines along the bank looked like massive cutouts against the sky. I parked in the gravel patch Grandpa leveled himself, walked up the porch steps. The second one still creaked loudly, and sat in the chair next to the one that used to be his. The air smelled beautifully like rain and pine resin. I checked my email. Margaret had sent the full document package, the acceptance of successor beneficiary form, the beneficiary designation confirmation, and a 1-page summary of the trust terms. Everything was meticulously formatted and flagged with sticky tabs, completely ready for my signature. At midnight, I read each document twice through the glowing screen. Then I closed my laptop and listened to the rhythmic lapping of the lake. Grandpa used to sit right here and say, "Patience isn't weakness, Iris, it's timing." I always thought he was talking about fishing. The tears came suddenly without warning. Not a breakdown, just a quiet overflow that I let happen in the dark. I cried because I wished this were entirely different. I wished my dad had been the kind of man who would have taken me fishing at this lake instead of calculating its resale value. I wished my mom had simply asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what was practical. I wished I didn't have to sign a cold legal document at midnight to protect myself from the exact people who were supposed to protect me. But wishes don't hold up in court. Trust documents do. I wiped my face, locked the cabin door, and drove back home. I lay down in bed and set my alarm for 11:45 p.m. In 6 hours, I would turn 18. In 7, my family would find out that the cabin was never theirs to take. 11:50 p.m., my bedroom door was closed shut. The house was entirely silent. Greg and Denise went to bed an hour ago, and Kelsey's light went off at 10:00. I opened my laptop and connected to a private video call. Margaret appeared on the screen from her home office, wearing reading glasses over a stack of papers lit sharply by a desk lamp. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I whispered. "When the clock hits midnight, you are a legal adult in every sense that matters. I'll walk you through the signing." She went through the motions one more time, clear and precise. I signed the acceptance of successor beneficiary form, a single-page document confirming I was formally receiving the trust my grandparents created. From that exact second forward, every decision about the trust's assets ran strictly through me and Margaret as co-decision makers. "Now," she said, "first thing tomorrow morning at 8:00 a.m., I'll go to the county recorder's office and file a asterisk lis pendens. Once it's recorded, no one can sell, transfer, or encumber the title while it's active." "What if they've already filed something?" I asked. "Then whatever they filed will be flagged. The chain of title will show the trust recorded 6 years ago, not your father. Any conflicting document gets kicked back instantly." I looked down at the signed paper in my hand, my name written in dark ink. Margaret's voice softened just slightly. "This isn't a trick, Iris. This is your grandfather's last gift. You just had to be old enough to accept it." The clock on my laptop clicked over to 12:03 a.m. I was 18. I was the legal beneficiary of the Tremaine family irrevocable trust. And downstairs in the garage, my uncle's quit-claim deed was already a completely dead document. He was going to find that out in about 9 hours. Across town in the kitchen of a rented duplex, Wade Tremaine was printing documents. I didn't know this at the time. I pieced it together later from what the county clerk told Margaret and what Greg eventually admitted during one of our harder conversations. But here's what happened that same night. While I was signing my acceptance form upstairs, Wade printed a quit-claim deed, a one-page form that transfers property rights from one party to another without any warranty of ownership. It was legitimate when used correctly, but criminal when the person signing it had no rights to transfer. He had called Greg at 11:30 p.m. telling him, "Everything's ready. We file at 9. The recorder's office opens at 8, but I want to make sure Iris is distracted with birthday stuff first." Greg hesitated, asking, "You sure about this, Wade? They're dead." Wade fired back, "Greg, we're next of kin. It's simple." It wasn't simple. It was forgery dressed up in standard real estate language. Wade also had a second document open on his laptop, a purchase agreement with Ridgeline Development, LLC, for a purchase price of $450,000. The closing date was set for 30 days after the quit-claim deed was recorded. If Wade couldn't deliver a clean title within that window, he'd owe Ridgeline a $45,000 penalty, plus damages. He had signed that agreement 2 months earlier, before my grandparents' title had even been fully searched, assuming nobody had planned otherwise. Wade had bet nearly $500,000 on a piece of paper that didn't belong to him. He just didn't know it yet. And in 9 hours, when he walked into the county recorder's office with his quit-claim deed and his confident handshake, he was going to find out that the entire chain of title told a different story. My birthday party started at 4 in the afternoon. The living room was packed with maybe 20 people, neighbors, a few of my parents' friends from church, 2 of Greg's old business contacts, and Kelsey's best friend's family. Nora Beckett from next door to the cabin was here too, sitting near the window with a glass of lemonade and sharp, watchful eyes. There were balloons, a banner that said *Happy 18th in silver letters, and a large sheet cake from the bakery on Main Street. I smiled and thanked everyone, opening small gifts like a journal, a gift card, and a picture frame. In my jacket pocket, folded into a neat square, was the signed acceptance form from last night. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to because it was already done. Greg stood up near the cake table and tapped his glass, and the room went quiet. "I just want to say Iris is officially an adult today. Denise and I are so proud of her." He paused, looking around the room. "And as a family, we have some exciting plans for the future." He looked at me and smiled, adding, "Right, Iris?" Every single face in the room turned toward me. "Thanks, Dad," I said, offering nothing more. Greg waited a beat, then laughed it off and raised his glass, and the room followed as conversation resumed. From the corner of my eye, I saw Wade by the front door, checking his phone and typing something fast with both thumbs. Nora caught my arm as I passed by the window, leaning in close and smelling like lavender hand cream. "Your grandmother would want you to know something," she whispered quietly. "I saw your uncle at the cabin last week with 2 men in suits. They were walking the lot line with a measuring tape." Wade had brought the buyers to the property before he even had the title. That was how confident he was. After the cake was cut and the plates were passed around, Greg stood up again. This time, his voice was louder and far more deliberate, the voice of a man who had been waiting for an audience. "Before we wrap up, I want to share something with everyone," he said, putting his hand on Denise's shoulder. "Our family has been going through a tough time financially. Some of you know about the store. It's been hard." A sympathetic murmur rippled through the guests. "But Harold and Vivian, my parents, they left us something, the cabin out at Cedar Lake. And as a family, we've decided to sell it to secure everyone's future." "We've decided." I felt the words land on my skin like ice water. He was announcing it in front of 20 people as if it were completely settled. He looked right at me and smiled, saying, "Iris understands. She knows this is what's best for all of us, right, sweetheart?" The room waited as every eye found me. Neighbors who had known me since I was small, Nora with her lemonade, and Kelsey half hidden behind the couch. Denise added with a tight smile. It's what responsible families do. We sacrifice for each other. I set my fork down onto my plate, the loud clink being the only sound in the room. I never agreed to sell the cabin, Dad. Greg's smile stayed fixed, but the muscles around his jaw tightened instantly. She's kidding. Birthday nerves, he muttered smoothly. I'm not kidding, I said. Wade stepped forward from the doorway, his voice dropping into a low warning. Come on, Iris, this isn't the time or place. I picked up my glass of water, took a slow, deliberate sip, and set it back down. You're right, Uncle Wade. This isn't the time, I said, holding his gaze fiercely. The time is 8:00 a.m. tomorrow morning. Absolute silence fell. Wade's phone buzzed loudly in his pocket, but he didn't check it. No one in the room moved. The guests started leaving rapidly after that, offering polite goodbyes and tight smiles, the kind of exit people make when they can feel a massive storm building inside someone else's house. Within 30 minutes, the living room was completely empty except for family, Nora, and two neighbors who seemed entirely unsure whether to go or stay. Denise waited until the front door clicked shut behind the last guest, then wheeled around and turned on me in the kitchen. Her voice was controlled but pitched loud enough to carry through the house. Do you have any idea what your father is going through? She stepped closer to me. He might lose this house, Iris. Our house, I asked. The one you sleep in every night, and you're stubbornly holding onto a cabin you only visit on weekends. I visit every weekend, Mom, I countered. That's not the point. She pressed her palms flat against the kitchen counter. We are a family. Families make decisions together. And if you loved this family, you wouldn't need a lawyer to tell you what to do. The room went entirely still. I stared at her, my stomach dropping. How do you know about a lawyer? Denise didn't flinch. Wade found the business card in your bag last week. Margaret Caldwell. Who is she, Iris? My throat tightened, not from fear, but from the realization that they had been going through my personal things, desperately searching for something they could use against me. Before I could answer, Nora Beckett's voice cut through sharply from the kitchen doorway, even and firm. That girl has every right to talk to a lawyer, Denise. Vivian would have wanted that. Denise spun around, snapping, This is a family matter, Nora, please. Nora didn't move an inch. She looked at me, then back at Denise. Vivian was my best friend for 40 years. I think I know exactly what she wanted. The heavy silence between them could have cracked glass. I didn't say another word, knowing I didn't need to yet. Nora left, and the remaining neighbors slipped out quietly right behind her. Now it was just the 5 of us left, Greg, Denise, Wade, Kelsey, and me. Greg walked over and closed the kitchen door, the harsh fluorescent light buzzing loudly overhead. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and folded his hands on the table like a man about to deliver final terms. Here's what's going to happen, Iris. His voice was low, cold, and deliberate. Tomorrow morning, Wade and I go to the county office. We file the paperwork, the cabin sells, you get your share, a fair share, and we move on as a family. What's my share? I asked. 50,000, Greg muttered. Out of how much? Greg didn't answer. Wade, leaning casually against the door frame, filled the gap. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, kiddo. I looked directly at my dad. And if I say no? Greg's jaw set hard. If you fight this, you're on your own. No more help with college. No more living under this roof. The kitchen went entirely quiet as the faucet dripped once. You're threatening to kick me out on my 18th birthday, I whispered. Greg stared back, saying, I'm asking you to be part of this family. I pushed back from the table and stood up, my voice staying steady even though my hands were shaking. I am part of this family, Dad. I'm the part that keeps promises. I walked right past Wade, past Kelsey, who was sitting frozen on the stairs with her knees pulled tightly to her chest, and I went upstairs to my room. I closed my door, sat on my bed, and forced myself to breathe. Greg thought his final deadline was 9:00 a.m. tomorrow at the county recorder's office. He had absolutely no idea that Margaret's deadline was 8:00 a.m. I sat on my bed that night clutching the acceptance form I'd signed at midnight. My own father had just threatened to erase me from my own family if I didn't hand over a cabin that was legally mine. My mom had told me I didn't love them, and my uncle was planning to file a forged deed first thing in the morning. And all I could think was that my grandmother was completely right. She knew exactly who they would become the moment the money was on the table, and she had planned for it years before it happened. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, The county recorder's office opened its heavy glass doors, the fluorescent lights flickering to life inside the grand municipal hall. A clerk in a blue cardigan unlocked the long front counter. Margaret Caldwell was the very first person through the entrance, wearing a tailored gray blazer and carrying a sleek leather folder. She approached the desk, presented two meticulously prepared documents, a certified copy of the Tremaine Family Irrevocable Trust and a formal asterisk lis pendens notice, and asked for them to be immediately recorded against the Cedar Lake property parcel. The clerk reviewed the crisp paperwork, typed the coordinates into the master database to check the existing title records, and stamped both documents as officially recorded. Done. From that exact moment forward, anyone who pulled the public title on the Cedar Lake cabin would see a glowing legal red flag, notice of pending legal interest. Tremaine Family Irrevocable Trust, Margaret Caldwell, trustee. Iris Tremaine, beneficiary. At exactly 8:14 a.m., my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. It was Margaret. "It's done, Iris." Her voice was steady and absolute. "The asterisk lis pendens asterisk is recorded and the property is flagged. Whatever deed they bring in now will be instantly rejected on chain of title grounds." I hung up, sitting quietly at the kitchen table as I finished eating my bowl of cereal. Upstairs, I heard the familiar sounds of Greg getting dressed. In the kitchen, Denise was quietly making a fresh pot of coffee. It felt like a completely normal morning, the water running, a closet door snapping shut, the distinct metal clink of my dad's belt buckle. At 8:30 a.m., Greg and Wade came downstairs together. Greg had changed into his sharp business shirt, the exact one he used to wear to high-stakes bank meetings before his supply store began to go under. Wade had his usual manila folder firmly tucked under his arm. "We'll be back by lunch," Greg muttered, grabbing his car keys off the counter. I looked up from my bowl, meeting his eyes. "Good luck," I said quietly. Greg paused in the doorway for a second, staring at me as if searching for something hidden in my face or tone, but then he turned and walked out. I rinsed my bowl, dried it, set it in the cabinet, and waited for the real storm to break. I would never see their exact expressions firsthand, but I know precisely what happened because Margaret stayed behind at the recorder's office to watch the countdown conclude. At 9:05 a.m., Wade walked confidently up to the counter, sliding his newly printed quitclaim deed across the slick surface with a practiced nod. Greg stood right behind him, hands buried in his pockets, looking around the room as if they would be out the door in less than 10 minutes. The clerk took the paper, typed the specific parcel number into her system, and read the monitor. She frowned, typed the sequence a second time, and then completely stopped. "I can't record this document, sir," she said flatly. Wade leaned forward over the counter, his smile fatting. "Excuse me, why not? The property title is currently held under the Tremaine Family Irrevocable Trust, recorded back in 2020, the clerk explained routinely. "There is also an active lis pendens filed first thing this morning." Wade's face tightened. "That's impossible. My parents own that property. Sir, the deed was legally transferred to a trust 6 years ago. The chain of title is perfectly clear. This quitclaim deed does not match the current ownership record." Greg stepped up beside his brother, his voice rising in panic. "There is no trust. Our parents never mentioned a trust to us." The clerk looked between them coolly, sliding the paper back across the wood counter. "I'd highly recommend you speak with the designated trustee listed on the public filing, a Margaret Caldwell." Wade's hand slammed flat against the counter as the color drained completely from his face. The exact name on the business card they had illegally taken from my bag was now staring back at them from an unerasable public record. Greg turned to Wade slowly, his voice laced with sudden fury. "You told me this was going to be simple. You're a real estate agent, Wade. How did you not check the title history first?" Wade opened his mouth, but absolutely nothing came out. The clerk cleared her throat firmly, saying, "Gentlemen, I'll need you to step outside into the hallway if there is a personal disagreement." Margaret watched them from her seat across the room as they retreated, never saying a single word because the paperwork had already spoken for her. My phone buzzed violently at 9:22 a.m. I was sitting out on the front porch, watching the neighbor's automated sprinkler arc smoothly back and forth across the green lawn. "What did you do?" Greg's voice was shaking over the line, the loud sound of highway traffic rushing in the background. He was calling from the parking lot. I simply accepted what Grandpa and Grandma legally left for me, Dad, I replied evenly. That's all. You went completely behind our backs with some random lawyer we've never even heard of, he shouted. Margaret Caldwell has been the official trust attorney for 6 years, I countered softly. You just never bothered to ask. A heavy, agonizing beat of silence stretched over the phone. This is my parents' property, Iris, he said, his voice dropping into a hoarse whisper. I'm their son, and they chose to leave it to me. I took a slow breath, keeping my tone perfectly calm. They didn't do this because they didn't love you, Dad. They did this because they knew they couldn't trust you with it. The silence that followed was the longest, heaviest silence of my entire life. I counted 3 full rotations of the neighbor's sprinkler before he spoke again, his voice raw. We'll fight this in court. You can try, but the trust is completely irrevocable, I said. That means even I don't have the legal authority to dissolve it. There is absolutely nothing for anyone to undo. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped bitterly, and then the line went dead with a sharp click. I set the phone down on the porch railing, and then my hands began to shake uncontrollably. It wasn't from anger or fear, but from the crushing weight of having to say those exact words to my own father. The realization that the man who had taught me how to ride a bike was the exact same man who had just tried to strip away my inheritance was suffocating. I sat there on the wood steps until the shaking finally stopped. Then the phone buzzed a second time. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered, and a brisk, professional male voice filled the line. Miss Tremaine, this is Carter Briggs from Ridgeline Development. We need to speak immediately. He spoke with the rapid, calculating speed of a high-powered real estate developer. We have a binding purchase agreement with Wade Tremaine for the Cedar Lake property parcel, and he explicitly guaranteed a clean title. We've just been informed that a * lis pendens was placed on the lot this morning. That's correct, I said firmly. Can you explain what is going on here? Briggs demanded. My uncle does not own that property, Mr. Briggs. He never did. The cabin and the land have been held securely within an irrevocable trust since 2020, and I am the sole beneficiary. There was a long pause, the distinct sound of papers shifting frantically on the other end of the line. He formally represented himself to our firm as the sole legal heir, Briggs muttered. I understand that, but representation doesn't magically create legal ownership, I said coolly. I'd highly recommend you discuss this with him, and possibly with your own legal counsel. Briggs went quiet for a moment, his voice hardening when he spoke next. Miss Tremaine, is there any structural possibility of a sale? Our firm would be prepared to make a highly competitive offer directly to the trust entity. The property is absolutely not for sale, I replied instantly. Understood, Briggs said shortly. Then we will be immediately pursuing our legal remedies against Mr. Wade Tremaine. I gave him Margaret's office number and hung up. Within the hour, Margaret confirmed to Ridgeline's legal team that the trust was airtight. Wade had zero authority, and the entire purchase agreement had been executed under fraudulent representations of ownership. Ridgeline's corporate response was devastatingly immediate. They launched a massive civil lawsuit against Wade for breach of contract, demanding the immediate payment of the $45,000 penalty clause, plus extensive damages. Later that afternoon, Margaret called me back with one final piece of terrifying news. Iris, I had the recorder's office pull a certified copy of the quitclaim deed Wade tried to file before they officially rejected it. Her voice was incredibly serious. The document included a formal notary stamp, but the identification number does not match any registered notary public in this entire county. He forged the legal stamp. I closed my eyes tightly against the light. That's a felony, isn't it? In this state, yes, Margaret said quietly. Your uncle didn't just try to steal your cabin. He committed a severe crime to do it. Greg came home at 2:00 in the afternoon, walking through the front door like a man carrying an invisible, crushing weight. Denise was already waiting in the kitchen, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, and her face completely blotched from an hour of angry crying. I was sitting at the dining room table, but I didn't get up. Greg walked over and sat down directly across from me, staring blankly at the wood surface for a long time. I'm going to lose this house, Iris. His voice was completely flat, entirely emptied out of its usual authority. The bank is demanding $180,000 immediately. The store is gone. That cabin was supposed to be our family's only way out of this ruin. "I know you're struggling, Dad, and I truly am sorry about the business," I said genuinely. "Then help us. Sign the papers," he pleaded. "The cabin was never your way out, Dad. It was Grandpa and Grandma's final gift to me." "A gift?" Greg scoffed bitterly, slamming his palm down against the table. "For what? You're 18 years old. What does an 18-year-old kid desperately need with a lakefront cabin?" I looked at him dead on. "It's not about what I think I need, Dad. It's about what they explicitly wanted." Denise stepped into the room from the kitchen doorway, her voice sharp. "They were old, Iris. They weren't thinking clearly at the end of their lives. They were thinking clearly enough to hire a specialized trust lawyer 6 years before they died," I fired back. Greg stood up, his face contorting. "I'll contest the trust in court. I'll break it." Suddenly, a voice cut through the tense room from my phone. I had called Margaret before Greg walked in, leaving the line completely open on speakerphone. "Mr. Tremaine," Margaret's professional voice resonated clearly through the kitchen. "Contesting an irrevocable trust that was established 6 full years prior to the grantor's deaths, with their full legal capacity meticulously documented and witnessed by independent parties, will cost you far more in legal fees than the entire property is worth. I would strongly advise against it." Greg froze, staring down at my phone as the kitchen went entirely silent. He looked back up at me, really looked at me, and for the very first time in my life, I didn't see anger in my father's eyes. I saw total, defeated recognition. 2 hours later, Wade phoned the house line in a blind panic, and Greg picked up the receiver in the living room. I stood silently in the hallway, close enough to hear every word through the thin partition wall. "Ridgeline is suing me for everything, Greg." Wade's voice was completely stripped of its usual slick confidence. "They're demanding $45,000 in immediate penalties, plus another $60,000 in civil damages. Corporate is saying I committed real estate fraud." They referred it to the district attorney. Greg's response was freezing cold. "Did you forge that notary stamp, Wade? I thought we legally owned it, I assumed. You're a licensed real estate agent, Wade. You pull title records for a living. How did you just assume?" Greg shouted back. "You wanted the money just as badly as I did, Greg." Wade screamed over the line. "Yes, but I didn't commit a felony to get it," Greg said flatly. "I need a defense lawyer," Wade whimpered. Greg closed his eyes, saying, "So do I don't call this house again until you've hired one." He hung up the phone and sank heavily onto the living room couch, the old springs creaking in the quiet house. I walked upstairs. Kelsey's bedroom door was wide open, and she was sitting cross-legged on her bed with her headphones pulled down around her neck, her eyes wide with fear. "Is Uncle Wade going to jail? Is Dad in trouble too?" she asked, her voice trembling. I sat down on the edge of her mattress, pulling her hand into mine. "Dad made a lot of terrible choices, Kelsey, but Uncle Wade made criminal ones." She nodded slowly, processing the structural collapse of our family the way a 15-year-old does, not fully understanding the complex legalities, but knowing enough to be terrified of the fallout. I went to my own room, sat by the window, and watched the outside world go on completely uninterrupted as a dog walker passed down the sidewalk. I didn't feel victorious or happy. I just felt completely exhausted, like someone who had successfully run through a raging fire and hadn't yet looked down to see exactly how much of her skin had been burned. Over the next 3 weeks, the legal dominoes fell precisely as Margaret had predicted, each one striking the ground with a definitive thud. Ridgeline Development formally filed its civil lawsuit against Wade Tremaine for breach of contract and fraudulent misrepresentation. The county district attorney's office officially opened a criminal investigation into the forged notary stamp on the rejected quitclaim deed, and Wade's real estate license was suspended indefinitely pending the trial. Word traveled fast through our small town. Court filings are entirely public record, and within a week, the scandal had circulated through the local church parking lot, the Rotary Club, and the checkout lines at the grocery market. Greg didn't try to contest the trust. Instead, he sold his building supply store at a massive loss to satisfy his immediate debts with the bank and negotiate a tight repayment structure. The house was saved by a razor-thin margin. But their life savings were entirely gone. Denise went back to work for the first time in 10 years, taking a low-paying shift position at a pharmacy downtown on Lincoln Avenue. When neighbors asked, she pretended she just wanted to stay busy, but the whole town knew the real story. Harold Tremin's sons had tried to illegally sell his cabin, and his teenage granddaughter had completely stopped them. I formally enrolled at Ridgemont Community College that week, declaring a major in environmental science with a minor in forestry. The campus was located just 20 minutes from Cedar Lake. When I filled out my official enrollment forms, under the line for *current address*, I wrote down the cabin's address for the very first time in my life. It felt like coming home, because it finally was. Before I officially moved my things out of my parents' house, I asked Greg and Denise to meet me one last time at the quiet coffee shop on Birch Street, neutral ground. We ordered our drinks, and I waited until the ceramic cups were placed on the table before I spoke. "I love you both," I said, looking across at my parents. "I need you to know that, because what I'm about to say next might not sound like it. The cabin is absolutely not for sale, not now and not ever. I will never be made to feel guilty for keeping a sacred promise I made to Grandma Vivian, a promise she trusted me with because she knew nobody else in this family would keep it." Denise started to interrupt, her voice defensive. "Iris, we only wanted what was best for. Then start by being completely honest about what you actually did." I cut her off firmly. "You tried to steal and sell a home that didn't belong to you. You threatened to throw me out onto the street on my birthday, and you illegally went through my personal bag to find information to use against me." Denise closed her mouth tightly, unable to meet my eyes, and Greg simply stared deep into his coffee cup. "I'm not cutting you out of my life permanently," I continued quietly. "But if we are going to have any kind of relationship going forward, it will be built strictly on respect and honesty, not on financial expectations, and certainly not on guilt." Greg finally looked up, his voice rough and broken. "I don't know how to fix this, Iris." I stood up from the table, sliding enough cash next to my cup to cover all 3 coffees. "You don't have to fix it today, Dad," I said softly. "I'll call you on Sunday." Kelsey showed up at the cabin a few weeks later on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in May, carrying a warm pizza box and wearing her favorite oversized hoodie. "I brought lunch," she said with a small smile. "Hope you like pepperoni." "Always," I smiled, opening the screen door wide. We sat out on the front porch with paper plates in our laps, watching a giant blue heron stand perfectly motionless in the shallow water near the boat dock. "I didn't know about any of it, Iris," Kelsey said softly after a long silence. "Mom and Dad never told me what they were planning in the garage. Was I part of the problem? Did they take from you to give to me?" I looked at my younger sister, realizing she had never chosen to be the favorite child. "You were just a kid, Kels," I said gently, leaning over to pull her into a side hug. We both were. She rested her head against my shoulder for a long moment, watching the ripples move across the blue water. "It really is beautiful out here," she whispered. "Can I come back and visit you sometimes?" "Anytime you want, Kels," I replied. We didn't talk about our parents, the trust, or Wade's pending criminal charges for the rest of the afternoon. Instead, we talked about her upcoming school projects, the blue heron, and whether the wooden dock planks would need to be replaced before the height of summer. Grandma Vivian was entirely right. The cabin didn't just protect a piece of land. It successfully made an honest, quiet space for something entirely new to begin.